Aloha and welcome to the video. So this week I'm going to be actually finishing up a project I started a long time ago. So this is a Hawaiian style knife, a pahoa. It's a slashing style pahoa. I had gotten to this point in time a long time ago in a video that I posted maybe a month or two ago, and I'd messed up on the nihumano, the triangle pattern. That second triangle, I didn't inset it deep enough, and as I was sanding down, I sanded down the corner. You can actually kind of see it there, the second triangle from the tip of the knife. And because of that, I kind of ruined it, or at least I knew I would need to pull it out and fix it, and it irritated me so much that I just put it to the side because it was a personal piece. I wasn't working on it for someone else, and decided that I would work on it later. So this week I was looking at it and I thought, you know what, it's time to finish it up. So the first step I had is I needed to pull out the remainder of the pearl, the mother of pearl that was in that inlay. And then once I had that pulled out, I went back and cleaned up the edges. I did be careful to not gouge out or ruin any of the size, because I didn't want it to be a larger shape. I wanted it to be roughly the same size. I had a couple leftover triangles from when I had first cut these out, and so luckily one of those was about the right size. I just needed to customize the cutout section to kind of fit that a little bit cleaner. I do want to be careful though, because I don't want to do this a third time. So the basic steps is I cleaned out the previous inlay. I cut this to shape so that inlay fits. And then once I get it to a good fit, I'm going to go ahead and super glue it into place, and I can start working on the remainder. So originally for this piece, I was going to do just the triangle pattern on one side with a dot made of whalebone on the handle. But as I was looking at it on this piece, I kind of decided to go a different direction, and you'll see that here in a bit. So now that I have this glued into place, I'll just use the metal file to smooth it down. I'll eventually go over it with a sanding disc, but the metal file gets it all, for the most part, flush to the surrounding koa and ready to sand. So there's the whalebone dot that I was talking about. So I have some slates of whalebone that were a gift. You can't purchase it, and so that's why this is a personal piece. It'll sit in my family. So originally I made those whalebone dots, and I was going to put those in the handle and then just have the triangle pattern on one side. But I thought it'd look kind of cool to have that triangle pattern on both sides, but instead of having pearl on both sides, what I was going to do is, or what I decided to do now, is I'm going to use some of this whalebone that I have left, and I'm going to cut a mirrored nihomano pattern on the other side out of whalebone. But then the dot, I'd have one pearl dot and one whalebone dot. So the side of the pahoa, the side of the knife that has the whalebone triangles will have a pearl dot, and then the side that has the pearl triangles will have a whalebone dot. That way it'll have a nice contrast when you flip it from side to side. I thought that would look kind of neat, kind of cool. Or it'll look horrible. We'll find out at the end. So the first step is I'm just tracing out these triangles onto this whalebone. I'm trying to be as careful as I can to not waste material. I will probably never get more whalebone. So whenever I use this material, and I've used it on one other piece, I'm very careful with it, and I try to use only as much as I need for what I'm doing so that I still have some left over. But now that I have the triangles cut out to base shape, I'm just flattening them, the backside of the whalebone, so that it insets nice once I cut in the triangles, and then cleaning up the edges with the metal file. And then there was some gapping on the triangles, and so I went ahead and put some sawdust, some super glue, and that's what I was finishing off there on the pearl side, even though those are already inlaid. So the first step here, the previous video, the part 1 of this was months ago. So if you happen to find it, you saw a very similar process flow. What I'm doing is I'm cutting in the triangles and then gluing in. The reason why I glue them in right away rather than cutting in each triangle and then gluing them all in at the end is I've noticed previously in older pieces that I've done that because the shapes are so close to each other, there's not a whole lot of coal wood in between the triangles, and so it's easy to gouge out or to ruin. By gluing in the insets, or inlays, not insets, I'm sorry, by gluing in the inlays, it makes it gives it stability so that it's easier to cut out each additional triangle without gouging any of the surrounding wood. And so it just makes it for a little bit smoother of a process, doing it one at a time like this rather than cutting them all out and then going back and putting all the triangles in place. And I don't have to keep track of the triangles when I do it this way. Each inlay is slightly different than the last, even though I cut them all to shape. I don't have any templates for this, and so there's just a little bit off, a little bit different. They're hand shaped, but gluing them in one at a time makes it easier to keep track of that. And then same process that I did with the pearl, where once I had them all glued into shape, I'm using a metal file to flatten them down. I do that because both the bone and the pearl are harder materials than the coal wood, and so that makes it so I can make them flush before I go to sand with the sanding disc. The next step here is to prep the dots. Now I cut these dots to match perfectly with that bit you just saw, and I did that so it'd be really easy to cut in the holes for these. And then same process, use some super glue, put them into place, and then I fill in around the edges with wood shavings, and then put in that super light super glue. And it's just, the purpose behind that is that way if there's any imperfections between my inlay and the material, that glue fills it in nice. And so the next step here is to cut in the groove where the tiger shark teeth are going to be put into place. I noticed while I was cutting the groove that I had a couple rough edges on this underside right here, and so I needed to clean that out. When I had left this piece a few months ago, it was fully shaped but not fully sanded, and so I had noticed a lot of small imperfections as I was going back and forth, and I just needed to clean those up. But I'm going to be sanding this down to 320, and then once I have it sanded down, I'll put the teeth in. I will be sanding it again after I put the teeth in, but only a light sand, and so I like to get it almost completely sanded before I put the teeth. And then I'm going to do the same process flow that I do with most of my pieces. I use a little bit of epoxy just to hold the teeth in place. Let the epoxy cure overnight, and then the next day I come back. This makes it easier for me to tap holes into the teeth, and I'm just using a tungsten carbide bit. And then once I've tapped holes in the teeth, I can come back and tap holes into the coil wood. The bit I'm using, I can't remember the size of this bit. I think it's like a 1/16 inch bit. But I mark where I'm going to go first, and then I drill, so that way I get a nice even spacing on all of those holes. And then I cleaned up the sand, or I sanded down the where I drilled just to make it a little bit cleaner. And then the last step that I have here before I can start lashing is going to be oiling the piece. And man, does this piece just oil up absolutely gorgeous. Oh, I had forgotten that the piece of koa that I'd used for this knife was just a beautiful flame curl. It just looks like waves of fire. It's absolutely gorgeous, beautiful piece. Turned out beautiful. And I love the contrast in colors. So like the whalebone is kind of like a natural yellow color to it. And then the pearl is really shiny, and so there's some nice contrast on both sides between the pearl and the whalebone, and then the whalebone and the pearl. I really like how that turned out. That ended up being a nice aesthetic look that turned out really well. The next step here is going to be lashing in the teeth. I've already cut in the holes. It's just going to be a simple triangle pattern. So I lash it up in one direction on one side, then turn around and go up the other direction on the other side. When the lashing is finished, you'll see the triangle shape in the cordage. You can see it there. A few different lashing patterns, but this is one of my favorites. It's just a simple pattern, but I think it looks good. The next step is to put on the wrist guard. For the wrist strap, not wrist guard, but wrist strap. For the wrist strap, I'm going to be putting a tassel, a feather tassel at the end. This is more decorative. I accidentally forgot to hit record on my video, so you don't get to see me lashing up the feathers. But once I've lashed them and put a knot, I do put some glue around it just to kind of lock it into place. And then the final step is to lock that tassel into place with the wrist strap, and I tying that knot, and then put a few more layers of protection on it. So here is the final piece. This is inside of my workshop. I'll show outside afterwards, but man, this is an absolutely gorgeous piece. I love the way that it turned out. Absolutely stunning. I am going to be testing with this piece. It's a personal piece. Most personal pieces I don't mind testing with. Plus, it was kind of a really long, thin taper, and so I kind of thought it would cut good. I'm still recovering from a slight shoulder injury, so I can't really strike it very solid. But even with those lighter strikes, it still cut really deep. I ended up striking a second time off camera, but because I didn't show that, I left it out. But here is the final piece. I loved working on it. It's kind of funny that I stopped working on it because I got irritated, but I'm happy that I came back to it and finished it off. Let me know in the comments below what you think, if you liked it, if you thought it was crap. If you enjoy my videos, go ahead and leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Aloha and mahalo.